afternoon. It's Monday, the 24th of August. I'm Erin Viner. This is IBA News broadcasting from Jerusalem. We open with the stock market, where prices are again falling sharply in the Tel Aviv Stock Exchange, with shares down some 3% today following yesterday's loss of 4 percentage points. Financial markets around the world are also declining amid deepening concern over the state of the world's second largest economy in China, where the main index today plunged 8.5%. and what has been its greatest decrease since the early days of the global financial crisis. Oil prices, commodities, and currencies of many developing nations also tumbled out of fear that a significant slowdown in Beijing could also negatively impact economic growth internationally. In the United States, Wall Street is expected to suffer heavy losses when it opens a short time from now. Joining me now in the studio to discuss the economic situation in China is Yael Einav, who is the founder and general manager of the Israeli-based business firm specializing in the Chinese market called Why China. Hi, Yael. Thank you for being with us.
Hi, good afternoon.
What light can you shed on the situation of what's going on in China and why suddenly it's going into economic meltdown?
Well, meltdown maybe is a little bit strong. I think we were seeing something much, we're not used to. We're used to 10% GDP growth for 20 years. And now we're starting a new phase. And in this phase, we might expect 4, 5, 6, or 7% GDP growth, which is still not a collapse. We're talking about a slowdown. Now we feel it in China, but I see it as a little bit different, because I see it not just as an economic crisis or slowdown. I see it more as a political turnover. Now we see, it's the first time that we actually see trouble in this arena. We're talking about the Communist Party, and it's the biggest asset of all. You know, they control the country, they control the economy, they're doing everything. And suddenly we see Xi Jinping in a real trouble here. First of all, he started with the anti-corruption campaign, which now, is all over China. 100,000 officials were purged. So he has a lot of resistance in the country itself. This is one part. The other part is all the residents, the small residents who went into the stock exchange for the last 2 years, when the government is actually participating with them in the stock exchange, and now they are left without anything. We're now hearing a little bit of, we don't see it still, we don't get the pictures, but there are already talks about people jumping from buildings and, a feeling of a crisis. That could lead to a real political problem in China. And when the political problem will occur in China, then we can discuss a real crisis.
Well, if these issues are not addressed and things continue, the situation continues to deteriorate, what kind of an effect will that have here in Israel? Is China still one of Israel's largest trading partners?
Well, China should be one of Israel's largest trade partners, and also, as you have seen lately, there's a lot of companies that are being bought by Chinese conglomerates. That, I think, will not change. Not just that it won't change, it will even increase, because now there is a lot of money in the market, and it won't go into the stock exchange. It will get outside of the country and maybe be invested in companies here in Israel. So actually, I expect an increase in at least in the mergers and acquisitions that we're seeing here in Israel from China, and not the other way around. So maybe the effect will actually be good for us.
So when you look at the overall financial situation and what's happening, do you have the sense that we're on the verge of another global financial crisis?
I don't know about global. I know only China. It's 1.4 billion, and I really, really respect the way they are handling crisis. We saw it in 2008. We saw it all the way through. There is a central government. There's $4 trillion reserves, foreign currency reserves. So they still are, they are still here, and they're still very strong and very centralized. And if this will continue, they'll find a way to at least, keep going on, even in a slower phase, but still going on. So I don't see it, as a big
Well,
It's not 2008, and I'll tell you more than that. I think.
Well, we're out of time, but we're going to invite you back. And
Sure.
thank you very much for the comforting words. It makes me feel a lot better.
I'm happy. If you're happy, I'm happy.
Yaeli Nav of Why China, thanks for being our guest this afternoon.
Thank you very much.
In other news, the nation is bracing itself for a human flood of more than 1,200 asylum seekers set to be released from detention centers in the South over the next 2 days on orders of the Supreme Court. In the wake of restrictions issued by Minister of the Interior Silvan Shalom barring them from entering either Tel Aviv or Eilat, it remains unknown where the migrants will go. We get more from IBA's Ario Sullivan in this report.
These gates will open tomorrow on the orders of the High Court of Justice, and 1,200 African migrants will go free from the Cholot and the Saharonim detention centers over the next 2 days. The court rejected a petition by human rights organizations against the anti-infiltration law, thus allowing the state to incarcerate illegal migrants. But it ruled that holding them for as long as 20 months was too harsh. This means 1,200 of the 1,700 being held in these facilities will be set free on Tuesday and Wednesday. Faisal and Anwar, like the rest, don't know where they'll be headed. Speaking fluent Hebrew, they say they want to live with dignity. Interior Minister Silvan Shalom has announced that they will be barred from going to Eilat, where 1 in 10 residents is an illegal migrant worker, and of course to Tel Aviv, where residents of neighborhoods in the south have long protested against the presence of migrants. There are an estimated 50,000 African migrants in Israel, and most of them live in Tel Aviv. Holding signs that read, "Deport them now," and "Today we are taking the law into our own hands," harassment, assault, and theft. We don't feel safe in our streets or in our homes, they say. This migrant worker says they don't intend to bother anyone, but only came to Tel Aviv because it was easy to find a place to rent and employment, even though they don't have work permits. It's not clear where they will go, and they're expected to seek work and accommodation in the southern cities like Beersheba. But to enforce the ban means that some of those being released this week may soon find themselves back in the detention facility. Ariel Sullivan for IBA News.
More statements have been released from the tapes of Ehud Barak, including an accusation that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is weak. The latest revelations follow other recorded assertions from the former defense minister that Netanyahu's plans to target Iranian nuclear sites were thwarted 3 times during 2010 and 2012 by members of his own cabinet. And with more is IBA's political correspondent Eli Wagelenter.
Prime Minister Netanyahu won't do anything difficult unless he's forced to. This from former Defense Minister Ehud Barak in a second round of recordings broadcast on Channel 2 News last night. In another conversation, Barak analyzed Netanyahu's personality, saying Bibi himself is shrouded in a kind of deep pessimism. In the balance between fear and hope, he generally prefers to be more fearful. The recordings come from a series of interviews Barak conducted with 2 journalists for a forthcoming Hebrew language biography. The Prime Minister's office issued a statement last night saying, "The time has come to stop the irresponsible discussion about matters dealing with the security of the state." Several politicians and officials, including former Foreign Minister Avigdor Lieberman, who was involved in the discussions, accused Barak of harming national security and deterrence by describing the deliberations of cabinet meetings on whether or not to attack Iran. Lieberman accused Barak of hurting Israel's international standing. And Interior Minister Silvan Shalom said the fact that the censor approved the recordings for broadcast could lead ministers to hesitate before speaking freely in closed meetings out of concern that their words could be made public within a few years. On Friday night, Channel 2 News played a recording of Barak saying he and Netanyahu were prepared to launch an attack on Iran's nuclear facilities in 2010 and 2011, but refrained from doing so following the hesitancy of fellow cabinet ministers. According to Barak, at the time, Moshe Ya'alon, then Minister of Strategic Affairs, and Yuval Steinitz, then Minister of Energy, were not entirely supportive of the attack despite their vocal anti-Iran views. And according to Barak, neither was then IDF Chief of Staff Gabi Ashkenazi. Barak said Ashkenazi would not conclusively state that the army was fully capable of executing the attack. Knesset Foreign Affairs and Defense Committee Chairman Tzachi Hanegbi plans to summon officials from the military censor's office to determine whether they really approve publicizing Barak's comments and why. Aaron?
Thanks for that report. Well, support for the Iranian nuclear agreement appears to be gaining momentum now that U.S. Senate Democratic leader Harry Reid is on board. The lawmaker is so far the 27th and most powerful Senate Democrat to offer his backing. He released a statement not only expressing his strong support, but also his willingness to do everything in his power to ensure its approval. He said that the pact imposes the toughest inspections and verification regime in history, and that a diplomatic solution is certainly less costly in American blood and economics than any possible military option. If U.S. legislators reject the deal, Reid cautioned that the international community will neither back further negotiations nor continued sanctions against Iran. 34 votes are necessary for the Senate to stop the deal from being scuttled. And Reid, siding with U.S. President Barack Obama, now makes it more difficult for opponents to muster sufficient support from Democrats. So far, the only Democrats to come out against it are Charles Schumer and Robert Menendez. Republicans and Israel staunchly oppose the deal for making what they say are too many concessions that could actually enable the rogue nation to become nuclear armed. Reid's decision comes after the official reopening of Iranian and the United Kingdom's embassies in each other's capitals yesterday. British Foreign Secretary Philip Hammond today held talks with Iranian President Hassan Rouhani in Tehran and later told reporters that he expects that sanctions against the Islamic Republic could start to be lifted as early as next spring. Ahead of the talks, Hammond said that Britain must remain cautious in its relations with Tehran, but emphasized that while the renewing of the formal diplomatic relations marked the easing of tensions, that the current government in the Islamic Republic has adopted a more nuanced approach toward Israel than its predecessor. He said that disagreement over major issues still exists.
Iran is an important power in the region, and it is in everybody's interests that Iran is engaged in the region as a responsible actor in favor of regional stability. And we've come a long way over the last couple of years, but I would say this: let's walk first and try to run later. We've signed the JCPOA. That is a major step forward. We are now going to focus our attention on making sure that that is fully implemented on all sides, that we rebuild our economic relationships, and over time, I hope and believe that the trust that will be built through the implementation of JCPOA means that the underlying relationships will evolve, but it will be a process of evolution that will take place over time. And I hope that in the future we will have built up, we will have overcome the deficit of trust on both sides, which has existed for a long time, in a way that will allow us to have more constructive relationships in the region and beyond in the future.
British officials who attended the reopening of the Iranian embassy in London also addressed the significance of the development.
It's a very important day. We've been waiting for this for a long time. Iran is an extremely important player in the Middle East, and it's been very disappointing that we've not had proper diplomatic relations with them for so long. I think many of the problems in the Middle East with Syria and Iraq and with Daesh in the Middle East will not be solved without the input of countries like Iran, which has deep inside knowledge and local knowledge and understands the problems with a depth that we can't hope to match. Indeed, some of the contribution of the West over the last 100 and 150 years or so has in many cases made things more difficult. So we need the help of countries like Iran to secure peace in the Middle East. There are, of course, also important opportunities in education and commerce and culture, which I think we should both benefit from.
Well, I think it's a very good thing. It is a step towards normalizing relations. All the other European countries have got embassies open in Tehran. A very regrettable incident caused us to close ours, but I'm glad that we're reopening it. Iran and Britain have certain common interests. It's not just about economics, it is about politics in the Middle East. And I hope, of course everything's subject to proof, that this will lead to greater cooperation between our two countries and better relations.
The Israeli government has reportedly been involved in the fight against the Islamic State by purchasing oil from Iraq's semi-autonomous Kurdish region over the past several months. According to the Financial Times, Israel bought around 19 million barrels of Kurdish oil, valued at roughly $1 billion, between May and August of this year. The British paper estimates that amount meant about two-thirds of the country's oil needs, and that the deal was made likely in covert support of the Kurds' battle against ISIS. Although officials of the Kurdistan Regional Government are denying any oil sales, directly or indirectly, to Israel, they stated that their main concerns are to finance the campaign against the extremist Islamists while preserving government operations. The High Court of Justice has ruled that United Torah Judaism member of Knesset Yaakov Litzman cannot continue to serve as deputy health minister as long as there is no presiding minister. Prime Minister Netanyahu currently holds the health portfolio, according to an arrangement with the UTJ party, whose leaders have long opted to not accept appointments as full ministers on religious, ideological grounds against serving in the government. In response to a petition filed by the Yesh Atid faction, a panel of 5 justices ruled that the current setup is unlawful and that Litzman, who effectively governs the ministry in everything but the name, may fill the position. The court gave the government 60 days to either make him a full minister or appoint someone else. UTJ's rabbinical panel that makes the political party's key policy decisions, called the Council of Torah Sages, is set to meet on Wednesday to decide on a response to the ruling. Yesh Atid is hailing the decision as a triumph of public interest over political interests. Ishai Slisel, who was today indicted for murder and 6 counts of attempted murder, along with a series of related charges. The ultra-Orthodox suspect is charged with killing 16-year-old Shira Banki and injuring 6 others during a stabbing rampage at the Gay Pride Parade in Jerusalem last month. The assailant was released from prison just 3 weeks before the attack, after serving a 10-year term for a nearly identical crime that he perpetrated at the 2005 Pride Parade. Following court-ordered evaluations, Schliessel has been found to be psychologically fit to stand trial, but he so far lacks legal representation because of his refusal to recognize the authority of the court that he accuses of not abiding by Jewish law. According to the indictment, Schliessel's crimes were premeditated and carried out in cold blood based on his belief that the march contradicts the laws of Torah. The nation's commitment to combating terrorism must be carried out within the framework of law and in accordance with strict moral codes. That was the message that President Reuven Rivlin had for a group of 20 local council heads from Judea and Samaria he today hosted at his official residence in Jerusalem. The president also commended the settlement movement for what he called paying the heavy price of serving as Israel's front line along with IDF soldiers. He went on to tell the Yesha leaders that settlement has always been an expression of the ancestral right of the Jewish people. Turning to the nation's roads, where 2 people were killed today in separate accidents. A truck driver died after his vehicle overturned in the northern Negev this morning and then burst into flames between Kibbutz Shoval and Mishmar HaNegev. Another man in his 70s died a short time ago after sustaining serious injuries in a traffic accident near the Bracha junction east of Ashkelon, where his car also overturned after sliding into a roadside ditch. In other regional news, riot police in Lebanon deployed to the streets of downtown Beirut for a second night to battle further demonstrations against government corruption amid an ongoing crisis over garbage collection. At least 44 activists and 34 police officers were injured in the violence, which came hours after Prime Minister Tamam Salam hinted that he might step down following clashes on Saturday that left more than 100 others hurt. The protests shaking Lebanon are the largest in years, carried out by protesters who are slamming the political system that they say is dysfunctional, without a properly operating cabinet or parliament, nor a president for more than a year. Organizers say that they had to pull their supporters out of the area last night after men that they describe as political thugs began to fight with police and tried to tear down a barbed wire fence that separated the crowds from the government building. Security forces later used tear gas and water cannons to disperse the crowds from the commercial district of the Lebanese capital, and later sporadic gunfire could be heard way into the night as they fired shots into the air in further attempts to send those who remained away. French President François Hollande today presented his nation's highest decoration, the Legion of Honor, to 3 Americans and a Briton who prevented a likely massacre on a high-speed train to Paris with 500 passengers aboard when they tackled the attacker loaded with guns and ammunition on Friday. The French leader praised each as examples of the need for action when facing terrorism. 2 of the Americans are servicemen, but Hollande went on to say that that day they were simply passengers who behaved not only as soldiers but as responsible men. The entire world admires your courage and spirit of solidarity, said the French president, adding that they all serve as an inspiration for everyone. The gunman has been identified as 26-year-old Moroccan national Ayoub El-Khazani, who was captured and is now being interrogated by French counterterrorism police. Here at home, the National Insurance Institute has announced that monthly allowances will be paid up to a week earlier next month due to the upcoming holidays. Supplemental income will be paid on the 10th of September, and unemployment benefits will be allotted on the 11th. All other stipends and benefits will be paid on the 24th of the month. So those eligible should be certain to check their bank accounts on those dates. Returning now to financial news, and the shekel today lost strength against all major foreign currencies, while share prices on the Tel Aviv Stock Exchange, as reported earlier, were down across the board this afternoon. Here's a look at the numbers. The IBA weather team says we can expect another pleasant day tomorrow with another slight drop in temperatures and the chance of light rain in the north during the morning hours. Here's the forecast at home and abroad over the next 24 hours. Thank you for being with us this afternoon. We hope you'll join us again tomorrow when R.A. O'Sullivan will be here to bring you the latest breaking news from Israel. I'm Erin Viner, wishing you a great evening and shalom from Jerusalem.